Fabric is like the proverbial blank slate, and oh, how those who sew love a blank slate. Materials stretch before us, just waiting for those personal touches by hand or machine. Today we will share with you how to use machine stitches and embroidery to add texture and dimension to your fabric. Even putting in a hem doesn't have to be plain. It can be yet another way to add interest to the surface of your creations. With so much to learn, we need to get started. Welcome to my sewing room. This is the most beautiful linen blouse. I love the way it buttons down the front with the pretty pearl buttons, and this wonderful trim on either side is actually very tailored, although you see some beautiful machine techniques. The daisies that are sewn across, I have a little secret, these are actually sewn in the embroidery hoop. Then we have some tucks with a little scalloped edge on each side of the tuck, and then on either side of the center treatment is a bridging, which has entredeux and the bridging stitches and more entredeux. Then going down to the sleeves, the same treatment with the machine daisies, and the scallops and the tucks is featured on the sleeves. This is actually done on the embroidery hoop. It's unbelievable that you put a machine, just a regular machine from the sewing machine, you build it in, and this can be done in great long strips. The lines on either side, this is where we fold on this line in order to get a tuck, and then sew a 1/4 inch seam. Here the tucks have been sewn, and a beautiful little scallop has been stitched on the edge of each tuck. Now these lines right here are meant to be sliced open, and then the beautiful bridging stitch will be attached to each one of these sections to finish off that wonderful treatment on the front. I'm so happy to have as my guest today Nina McVeigh. Nina is an educator for Bernina of America. Nina, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Martha.
And thank you for that beautiful blouse with those beautiful techniques.
Oh, thank you. It was very fun to do, and as you mentioned, the decorative stitching with the wing needle was all done in the embroidery hoop. I have a hoop here, of course. This is a small hoop, so we would have done that in a longer hoop, and there is a special feature on the machine called endless embroidery that allows us to do that decorative band as long as we would need it. But it is just as simple as I said. You select a machine stitch and then go into embroidery, and I can program that to be rows and rows of that decorative stitch. Certainly a lot more precise than were I to stitch out those rows at the machine. And of course, using a wing needle, it's going to create that nice texture. Here is that band, again with the lines drawn a little more than a 1/4 inch from the end of that decorative stitching. Those lines are then pressed and sewn in with a 1/4 inch seam allowance, and then that nice little edge is done with pearl cotton and an overlock stitch just to give it that little bit of a scallop. When that is done, I'm then going to draw the lines on my fabric for the placement of the insertion. And the insertion, again, is finished with just very traditional finishing techniques. I'm going to show you how to scallop that nice little edge that now covers the edge of my wing needlework. So at the machine, I've attached a cording attachment, and I'm going to run pearl cotton through that. And I've also placed my 5-groove pin tucking foot on the machine so that when this cord goes through the attachment, it will ride right under the middle groove of my pin tucking foot, just kind of holding it there very, very nicely. My fabric will lay right next to my cording guide, and I always like to pull on this cording or this pearl cotton to make sure that it runs very smoothly. And I've set my stitch, and I'm simply going to sew. So it's catching my fabric on the left and jumping over the cord on my right. and it just creates a beautiful little scallop that you can see as it comes through the back of the machine.
Absolutely beautiful.
Isn't
Just
that
a
pretty?
delicate little trim. And that was with the pearl cotton and the stitch. Now tell me again, you had your...
I have a cording attachment on.
Okay.
And I've run my number 5 pearl cotton
Okay.
through the cording attachment underneath the pin tucking foot, the 5-groove pin tucking foot, and then I've selected the very overlock stitch. Actually, any stitch that stitches on the fabric on the left and then jumps off the fabric to the right and grabs the cord would work for that.
All right. Nina, I want to show our viewers one more time this beautiful, I just love that little edging, the little scallop on the side, this beautiful trim, which has these wonderful daisies that go all the way across. And I love wing needlework. You know, I'm kind of the wing needle queen. And the beautiful trim on either side, the insertion or the bridging. And that is the most delicate. It almost looks like a little bit of tatting run along the edge, doesn't it?
Yes.
Well, this is an absolutely wonderful tailored blouse, and I thank you so much for those fabulous techniques.
Thank you, Martha.
And now Nina has brought some sewing inspirations to share with you. Oh, Nina, tell us about this wonderful quilt that looks just like an antique quilt.
This is actually a silk quilt, Martha, done with silk dupioni and wool batting. And it's been washed several times, which gives it that antique look and that antique feel. The design was all done in embroidery, and then it was machine stippled. I machine stippled the whole piece around the embroidery.
Oh, and the ecru and blue, absolutely beautiful. Oh, look at these happy, wonderful colors.
Quite a contrast from the
yes,
light
well,
one
we loved
to
it.
this one, but again on silk. And I love working with silk in my quilts. It just really shows off the quilting design. These designs, again, were all done in embroidery.
In embroidery, all the designs and the different pieces.
And then the ribbon was
and
added.
the grosgrain ribbon. Oh,
with
so
dual
pretty.
feed, so it really looks like lattice, but it's ribbon.
Oh, beautiful. And this wonderful table runner. Oh my.
And
silk also.
Silk and cotton blend. As I said, I love working with silk. The quilting design itself done in embroidery and the stippling on the machine.
Okay, and oh my goodness, let's look at this. Pretty, pretty, pretty. Tell us about this center design here.
These textures were created with needle punch. We have a needle punch accessory set for the sewing machine, and this was punching a lot of silk pieces, little organdy ribbons, and then it was machine beaded in this area, and then of course the rest of it was free motion quilted.
This is just beautiful. Machine beaded. Oh my goodness. I guess we can do almost everything on a machine now, can't we?
Yes.
Nina, thank you so much for bringing these beautiful silk quilts. And you know how much I love silk dupioni too. And I just love what you've done with this.
Thank you.
And now Nina has some sew booking for you. I can't wait to see your wonderful new granddaughter in our sew booking section.
This was so fun to do. Maybe it's because she's so new, but maybe it's also because of the wonderful things that we can do with the sewing machine in scrapbooking.
Yes, absolutely.
This was done, this is the full page, so that's how it's going to end up looking. While I was doing that, of course, as we do those separate steps, that first step was done in embroidery, and that was her name. Now, anytime you do anything that is that satin stitched on paper, it becomes a little bit fragile. With the wonderful stabilizers that we have now, it's important that you use a very sturdy stabilizer behind this so it helps stabilize that name in that paper because of the satin stitching. So once that was sewn, then we got to play with the pictures a little bit. And on this picture, I have simply taken ribbon and used the blanket stitch and blanket stitch that ribbon down, flip-flopping at the corners to make that corner. You know, you could also do a mitered square corner here, but this is easier. And so it just comes out that way. Now, I've started and finished here at the bottom of the picture, so if we look back at that final page, you can see that I've added an embellishment there to cover up the beginning and end of the ribbon. And then the other picture that I used of the hands, again, this was blanket stitched on the final page, but here I've used the feather stitch to enhance that look around the picture. It's so nice now with our printers, with our digital cameras and our printers, that I could take these pictures and then print them out in a sepia tone so that I could coordinate that on the final page. And if we take a look at that again, once I've added the pictures, I've added, again, more buttons. I love to do the cluster of buttons and put a few beads in the buttonholes themselves, just to make that a little bit more special. And then the coffee dyed lace across the top just adds to that whole look of the sepia tone.
That is truly a beautiful scrapbooking page, and it is so much fun to use our sewing machines and the scrapbooking, the machine embroidery for the names, and you did machine embroidered flowers on there. And I'm delighted that you told us about using the paper behind there. Now, where was it you had to use the paper stabilizer?
Well, it's a regular stabilizer, like a good cutaway stabilizer.
Okay, cutaway stabilizer, okay.
When you're embroidering on this paper. Now, of course, this is a heavier paper, a cardstock, so it's a little bit more stable. But again, that's the only thing you really have to watch is the satin stitching on paper or cardstock.
And thank you for sharing the picture of your beautiful brand new granddaughter. What a blessing, what a joy. Thank you so much, Nina. And now we have some construction tips to share with you. I'm so happy to have as my guest today Lezette Thomason. Lezette is the owner of Children's Corner Patterns. Welcome to the show.
Thank you, Martha. Today I want to talk to you about little boys' rompers. This is a classic look for little boys and has been for decades. It buttons on the shoulders, and I have one here for summer, sleeveless, that is a gingham that is appliqued, and the other romper, also appliqued, is shown with a little boy's shirt. Now, if you will look on these two rompers, this one is the same style as the first two. This one is a different style, but these are completely finished down to the buttons and buttonholes, except for the bottoms of the legs. And that's what I want to show you now. So, I'm going to pick up this little boy's romper, and holding it in my hand, I'm going to go to the bottom of the leg, and at the crotch area, I'm going to separate the garment from the garment lining, and then holding one in one hand, one in the other, I'm going to separate them out, and where they were now wrong sides together, I need them right sides together to sew. So in order to do this, I'm going to take them, separate them out, flip them around, and put them right sides together just at the corner of the leg and the crotch. Now let me show you that again. Okay, our little pants are now lined up with the leg and the crotch. At that corner, I'm going to separate the garment from the lining, which are wrong sides together, and I'm going to take one way, one the other, spread them apart, flip them around, and put them right sides together. I'm going to put a pin there and pin those together and sew them all the way around. Now I'm going to be sewing this with a 1/4 inch seam, and I'm going to pull that leg entirely around and match the side seams if the garment has a side seam. If it doesn't have a side seam, then match the center of the seam, center of the garment. So now I have this much pinned. You can pin it all the way around, and I'm going to sit down, and this would be the area that I would be sewing right here. So after you get it sewn, then you can take, the pins will be removed and you will just flip it back to the right side. So now I want to show you one that has been sewn and flipped back to the right side, just like this. This one side is completely finished, and you can see it's a nice edge. You'll always want to press that so that none of the lining shows. And then you will do the other leg exactly the same way. The last one that I want to show you is this one, because this little romper has been done exactly the same way. I have one finished leg, one to finish like we're going to finish the others previously, but this one has been done for a baby boy or a little girl as a bubble. And all you would do would be to add a casing from about 3 inches from the crotch edge, front and back, and run elastic through that casing and top stitch across it at the end. And then you have a precious little bubble for a baby boy or for a little girl.
Now, Lezette, how do you usually finish the crotch on this?
Well, Martha, there's 2 ways to do this. You can either just sew the crotch together, garment to garment and lining to lining, or if you choose, you can put in snaps in the crotch. For this, you can use in a snap system, or you can use snap tape. And if you use snap tape, the easiest way to sew that is with your zipper foot.
All right. Thank you so much, Lezette. And now we have some hand embroidery to share with you. I'm so happy to have as my guest today Wendy Schoen. Wendy is the designer of Petite Crochet Patterns. She is a regular contributor to Sew Beautiful magazine, and she teaches at the Martha Pullen School of Art Fashion. Wendy, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, Martha. Today we're going to talk about hem stitching to attach a hem. So if you look at this little dress, you'll see that the placket down the front of the dress is attached with a drawn thread hem stitching going along the edge. Now if you follow that line down to the hem, you'll see that the hem stitching continues on. And hem stitching is not very difficult to do, and so I'll show you how it's done. So just look at this sample, please. If you notice, I have withdrawn a number of threads here, and I've withdrawn 1 thread here. Now this particular one single thread removed is going to mark the position of my first turn. Let me just turn it this way. So I'm going to take that in. This is going to be the folded edge of the inside of the hem. Okay, so you want to go ahead and finger press right on the line, the drawn line, that is. Okay, now that end is folded up right up to, but not past, this drawn area. If you can see what that is, that looks like right there, the darker area. Now that's going to get basted down so that it remains secure. Okay, so the next step is, as you can see, I've already basted my hem in place, and I've actually pressed it. I like to work with pressed cloth just so that make sure that I have the hem in the right place. Now hem stitching is worked from left to right or right to left. It doesn't matter. I prefer to do it from left to right because it makes a smaller knot. So I'm going to be taking just bring my thread end into the hem. Remember, this is the wrong side, and then I'm going to make 1 little back stitch to hold it in place. Now the hem stitch itself is bundle and tack, so it's 2 steps. The first one is to bundle a certain number of fabric threads. So in this area you'll see the remaining fabric threads. Those are the ones that I want to encircle with the stitch. So I'm placing my needle underneath the three threads. Now notice that my working thread or my sewing thread is in the up position, tucked under the tip of the needle. This is very important, so that when you come down, you're going to not only encircle the threads, but also bundle them together with a small knot. Now the next stitch is going to be the tack. Now the tack is going to be right next to the bundle into the hem only. And that stitch is not wrapped. So you want to leave the thread out of the way so it doesn't encircle it. So here we go for the next stitch. Bundle and tack. Bundle and tack. So it's just 2 steps. Now, this is the wrong side, as I said before. We're going to turn the work to the back. Give me one more stitch so you can see what it looks like on the right side. So this is the correct side, and this is the part that you would see down the placket. This side is not going to be seen. So when you tie off and on, you're going to use this hem or these stitches in order to secure the thread, just by bringing them through and then cutting it off. Okay, so now what I'd like to stress with hem stitching is don't be afraid to pull the thread out. If you think you're going to be afraid, then take a sample piece first, pull it out, get the feel for how it looks and how it acts, and then do your stitches on the practice piece. That way, if you make a mistake, you won't be ruining a big long piece of linen. But just keep in mind, it's very simple and anybody can do it. So I'm sure you'll be able to do it.
Thank you so much, Wendy. And now I have a piece from my vintage collection to share with you. This beautiful petticoat was another gift to me from Lezette Thomason. She purchased this petticoat at the Paris flea market. As you can see, it's totally plain down to the beautiful bottom level of the skirt, and it's totally beautiful when we get down there. Can you see the wonderful curved lace shaping with the 3 loops sort of in the middle, and the hand embroidery, and then the loop over here that comes around with the wide lace. Of course, it has a beautiful ruffle with wide lace on the bottom. The curving lace technique is absolutely gorgeous. There's a little mitering in there too. We also have an incredibly beautiful hand embroidered leaf. And if I were really going to guess a little bit, the leaf is maybe for fall. Well, leaf was a beautiful design, maybe for fall. And although this was at the Paris flea market, when I see leaves, I many times think of Canada, that this might have even gotten from Canada back to Paris. But anyway, this and the more leaves are hand embroidered over here. For my Sewing from the Heart today, I have a letter from Pat and Butch, dear friends of mine, husband and wife in Massachusetts. Dear Martha, last year a couple of my sewing students and I embarked on a project to benefit the Soldiers' Angels. Together we completed 7 quilts and pillowcases made of military-themed fabrics. Attached to each was a thank you card. It was a great feeling to utilize our God-given sewing skills to make military heroes feel loved and appreciated. We plan to do some more this year. What a great way to give praise to God for the gifts and passions He has given to us. I was particularly touched by your recent newsletter honoring veterans. I am a USO volunteer and know the thrill of being of service to our military people and their families, whether it is during a training exercise, deployment, or a homecoming. I am grateful to be part of such a humbling opportunity to give back. Love and hugs, Pat and Butch. Pat and Butch, and Pat, your sewing students, I'm so grateful that you took the time to make the quilts to see Soldiers' Angels as your project. I'm so glad you took the time to make the quilts and the pillowcases, and also to send a thank you note. I'm sure that that brought a touch of joy to each man or woman's heart as they received your beautiful gift. I want to thank you for joining me in my sewing room today. I've had a wonderful time, and more importantly, I hope you have, and I'd like to invite you back next time.